Aloha champions! Today is Friday, April 17th, 2020. Today we'll be reading the last chapter in our geology book, Deep Sea Detective Story. Our objective and what you'll do for a grade is you'll answer these two questions in full, complete sentences. Question 1. Where and when did geologists discover hydrothermal vents? Question number 2. How do creatures survive near hydrothermal vents? So we'll open up our story now to page 110, a deep sea detective story. The discovery of seafloor spreading at mid-ocean ridges was a turning point in geology. It helped explain how continents move, and it became a key part of the theory of plate tectonics. The discovery of mid-ocean ridges also changed how many scientists thought about the ocean bottom. Up until that time, many considered it to be a fairly boring place, cold and dark and relatively lifeless. Now suddenly, they'd found all this volcanic activity among mid-ocean ridges. Was that all? Or were other interesting things happening at mid-ocean ridges? Some scientists thought about volcanic activity on land. For example, Yellowstone National Park is a volcanically active place. True, no lava is erupting at Yellowstone, at least it hasn't for a very long time, but geysers and hot springs are all over the park. Scientists understood how Yellowstone's geysers form. Water seeps into deep cracks in the crust. The water is heated to very high temperatures by magma lying below the crust. Then a mix of hot water and steam shoots back to the surface where it explodes out of the ground. Were there geysers along mid-ocean ridges? Scientists wondered. All the ingredients were there: water, cracks in the crust, and magma just below. If seawater seeped down into cracks along the mid-ocean ridges, wouldn't it be heated by magma beneath the crust? Wouldn't this hot seawater then erupt to form deep-sea geysers? The idea made sense, but scientists needed to prove that these deep-sea geysers, or hydrothermal vents, really did exist. The scientists became detectives. Their first step was to look for clues along mid-ocean ridges. Deep heat. In the 1880s, a Russian ship traveling across the Red Sea collected water samples from the seafloor. Water on or near the ocean bottom is normally just a few degrees above freezing. Sunlight cannot reach such great depths. Cold water, like cold air, sinks. As a result, the ocean bottom is typically a dark, chilly place. Surprisingly, though, the water samples the Russians collected from the Red Sea's floor were warm. They were warmer than water at the surface. By the 1960s, ocean scientists knew there was a mid-ocean ridge in the Red Sea. They came across the old Russian water data. They decided to collect their own samples from the seafloor near the Red Sea's mid-ocean ridge. One water sample from near the ridge measured a toasty 111 degrees Fahrenheit. That's quite a hot bath. A sample of mud from the ridge was even warmer, 133 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hot enough to scald skin. Interestingly, the hot sediment contained all sorts of minerals. Scientists wondered why these minerals were there. Colored rocks. In the early 1970s, scientists took water samples along other mid-ocean ridges. Time and again, they found places where the seawater was unexpectedly warm. The scientists dredged up rocks from these sites. Most were dark volcanic basalt. A few rocks, however, were brightly colored. The scientists analyzed these colored rocks. They discovered that the rocks had started out as basalt, but their minerals had changed. The changes were characteristic of rocks exposed to very hot water. Was hot water from hydrothermal vents what had changed the rocks? The scientists suspected that it was. They guessed that as magma-heated seawater rises up through cracks in oceanic crust, it heats the basalt around it. The heat changes minerals in the basalt. Furthermore, some of those minerals dissolve in the hot water. As the hot water erupts from the seafloor, these dissolved minerals turn solid again and leave the water to mix with seafloor sediments. At this point, the scientists were convinced that hydrothermal vents existed on mid-ocean ridges. The next step was to find one. The search begins. Scientists headed into the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans aboard research ships. They sailed along mid-ocean ridges. They lowered instruments to measure water temperature and dredged up rocks. At sites that looked promising, they sent down small robots with cameras to snap pictures of the scene far below. Some photos showed mounds of rock covered with mineral deposits. Were these warm, mineral-rich sites the hydrothermal vents that they were looking for? To be sure, they needed to get a first-hand look. At the time, there were only a few underwater vehicles that could carry people all the way to the sea floor. These small submersibles belonged to the military. They were designed to retrieve objects from the ocean bottom and help rescue sailors trapped in sunken ships. Many people thought using submersibles for ocean exploration would be a waste of time and money. Even so, the scientists looking for hydrothermal vents eventually won support for a joint French-American expedition. It was called Project Famous for French-American Mid-Ocean Undersea Study. Its destination was the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. The expedition was a huge undertaking. It took 2 years to get everything ready. 3 submersibles took part, including one called Alvin. In 1974, a handful of lucky scientists became the first people to come face to face with a mid-ocean ridge. They saw great mounds of volcanic rock. They even saw the narrow rift along the top of the ridge, where lava erupts to create new crust. However, they didn't see a single hydrothermal vent. Galapagos luck. The scientists were disappointed but didn't give up. Another team decided to look for vents along the Galapagos Rift. This is a mid-ocean ridge west of Central America. Data gathered by instruments and cameras revealed both warm water and mineral deposits at several sites along this ridge. The Galapagos hydrothermal expedition began in early February 1977. The science team had many instruments, but just one submersible, Alvin. The expedition began with scientists lowering a camera-equipped vehicle down near the seafloor. For many hours, they towed the little vehicle over the ridge. It snapped a picture every few seconds. The scientists studied the photos carefully. It took a long time because there were 3,000 photos. Nearly all showed only barren volcanic rock, but 13 photos made the scientists' hearts beat faster. The photos were taken at a place on the ridge where the temperature was higher. They clearly showed rocks covered with mineral deposits. Nestled among the rocks were hundreds of large white clams. Were the animals there because the water was warm? Were they clustered around a hydrothermal vent? On February 17, 1977, Alvin headed down to the site. A pilot and the 2 scientists sat cramped together inside the small submersible. When the sub reached the ridge, the men stared out through small portholes at an amazing sight. Jets of hot, shimmering water were gushing out of cracks in the rock. As it mixed with cold water, the hot vent water instantly turned cloudy as dissolved minerals solidified. Tiny mineral particles fell like snow. They'd done it! The scientists had followed the clues to a major discovery. For the first time, they had located a hydrothermal vent along a mid-ocean ridge. Along with the vent, they had also discovered unexpected life. Seeing big white clams in a photograph was one thing. Seeing them in person was much more exciting. The clams around the vent were huge, unlike any clams the scientists had ever seen. The big surprise. In the months and years that followed, scientists found many more hydrothermal vents. Bizarre animals lived around most of them. What were the animals doing there? How did they survive in a world of total darkness with only rock, minerals, and hot water? Research provided the answer, and the answer shocked the world. On or near Earth's surface, most living things depend on sunlight as an ultimate source of energy. Green plants and algae use sunlight to make food. They do this through a process called photosynthesis. Many animals eat plants or algae. Other animals eat the plant eaters. But sunlight doesn't reach the seafloor, so how do vent dwellers survive? Scientists discovered that animals survive thanks to bacteria. Vents are home to unusual types of bacteria that use chemicals in hot vent water instead of sunlight to make food. The process is called chemosynthesis. Around hydrothermal vents, chemosynthetic bacteria are like plants and algae in the sunlit world above. Some vent animals eat the bacteria directly. Others eat the bacteria eaters. It is a deep-sea food chain scientists didn't know existed until 1977. Finding deep-sea hydrothermal vents and their communities of animals was one of the most important discoveries of the 1900s. So that will wrap up our reading of Unit 6, Geology, the Changing Earth. Remember, for this activity, you have 2 questions to answer in full, complete sentences. Question 1, where and when did geologists discover hydrothermal vents? And question number 2, how do creatures survive near hydrothermal vents? Thank you for your time, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.